Hey guys, we know you love these long 20-story videos and we love the feedback we get. However, it takes a while for our small team to make them. That's why we've moved over to a new channel, Wideawakehorror Extended, just for our long stories with a bigger team, and we will be uploading the longer stories from that channel from now on. So guys, please head over to our new channel and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new videos. The channel link will be in the video description and in the comments. And when we upload, comment that you're from the original Wide Awake Horror channel so we can appreciate you as one of the OG members. Thank you so much for being part of the Wide Awake Horror family. We hope to see you on our new channel. We love you guys.
I matched with this girl on Tinder, and honestly, at first, I thought it was too good to be true. Her name was Emily, and she was gorgeous. She had one of those smiles that looked like it belonged in a perfume ad or something. Her profile was super chill too. No weird bio, just something like sick of the fake stuff, just looking for something real. She had a few photos, one with her by the beach, another with her at a concert, and a cute one with a dog that looked like it belonged to a millionaire. It was all very perfect, but I didn't think too much of it. I figured maybe she was one of those Instagram perfect types, but whatever. We all post our highlights, right? We started chatting, and it didn't take long before I was hooked. She was funny, down to earth, and she kept saying she was looking for something real, not just some hookup or whatever. Like she hated fake people. She was super passionate about it. And I don't know, maybe it was the way she spoke or something, but I really bought into it. We talked for hours about anything and everything, our favorite movies, stupid childhood memories, what we wanted to do with our lives. She didn't seem like the type to ghost, and she made me feel like I was the only one she was talking to. She told me she hated playing games. So I thought it was all legit. After about 2 weeks of texting, we finally agreed to meet up. I was nervous, sure, but also excited. We picked a cozy little cafe in the city. Not too fancy, just a chill place with good coffee. I showed up early because I didn't want to look like an idiot walking in late, and I'm glad I did. I sat down, got my drink, and waited for her. I kept checking my phone to make sure I wasn't getting catfished or something. I know it's dumb, but part of me was a little paranoid. Time passed, and I kept checking the door, looking for some girl who looked like she stepped out of a magazine. But after what felt like 15 minutes, I started getting a weird feeling. Something wasn't right. The door swung open, and I saw a guy walk in. He was around my age, average height, wearing a hoodie and jeans. He looked like he'd just gotten out of bed. He saw me looking and waved awkwardly, and of stumbling over to my table. Hey, you're Jason, right? I stood up, confused. Yeah, I'm Jason. Are you, Emily? I asked, glancing around, thinking maybe she was running late. He shook his head and smiled weirdly. No. I'm Emily's brother. He said it like it was supposed to make sense, but it didn't. She's a bit shy, so I thought I'd come meet you first. She's actually on her way, she wanted me to check you out before she comes over. I kind of froze. It felt off, but I wasn't sure if I was overthinking it. He sat down without asking, and I just went along with it because I didn't know what else to do. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through it like we were already friends or something. I'll show you some pictures of Emily. You must have seen her profile already, but these are from her other accounts, he said, holding up his phone and showing me a bunch of photos of her. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I realized the accounts weren't just on Tinder. There were Instagram profiles, Facebook pages, even some older stuff from MySpace or whatever. Some of them had different names. And there were a couple of pics that didn't look like the same girl at all. One had her wearing glasses and a messy bun, and another was of a completely different girl with the same name. I tried to process it, but my brain couldn't catch up. I felt a cold pit in my stomach, but he didn't seem to notice. He was rambling on like it was no big deal, saying how it's just fun to mess with people who are too trusting. People fall for it, They think they're talking to one person, but it's me the whole time. Sometimes I just make up whole personalities for them. It's hilarious, he said. I started feeling like I was gonna pass out. My mind was racing and my stomach was churning. I could barely focus on what he was saying. He kept scrolling, showing me more photos, all of them of her or some version of her. The one thing that stood out was the names and dates on the accounts. They were all linked to the same date, like every one of them was created within days of each other. I kept trying to make sense of it. Maybe she had a really strange sense of humor or something. But then he pulled up a video, and that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. It was a grainy video from a night out showing a girl who looked just like Emily, but there was something off. The way she was acting, the things she was saying. She was standing next to another guy, someone who looked like he might have been in on it too. They were laughing, but it was the kind of laugh that made my skin crawl. The girl in the video wasn't Emily. It was a different face altogether. I didn't know who it was, but it definitely wasn't her. I stood up, feeling like my chest was closing in. I didn't say anything, just grabbed my jacket and started heading for the door. I could hear him behind me calling after me, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around. My heart was pounding so hard in my ears, it was like I was underwater. I left that cafe and blocked him on everything. Tinder, Instagram, even Facebook. I didn't tell anyone what happened because I wasn't sure what to say. What was there to say? This guy was messing with people's heads for fun. But the worst part was the feeling that he wasn't alone. I kept imagining how many other people he'd done this to, how many others had been fooled by this same girl, or Emily, or whatever her name was. I don't know if I'll ever really know what the deal was with her. Maybe she was real, maybe she wasn't. But that day, sitting there, I realized just how easy it is to be duped by someone who knows exactly how to play on your trust. And the thing that really freaks me out, I still don't know who the hell Emily was. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around what happened, but I can't get it out of my mind. Honestly, part of me doesn't want to tell anyone, but I feel like it's something I have to talk about just in case it happens to someone else. I met Ned on Hinge. His profile was all charm and good vibes. His pictures were normal, nothing too over the top. Just a guy who looked like he had his life together, smiling in some coffee shop, hiking the mountains, and hanging with a group of friends. He didn't do the whole look at me with my shirt off thing like some other guys. He seemed kind of real. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He had a quick wit, was funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything: movies, music, childhood memories. The kind of stuff you talk about when you're trying to figure out if someone's worth your time. And I don't know, it was nice. It wasn't like all those other weird Tinder convos where the guy starts out with something creepy like, "Hey, wanna send me some pics?" or whatever. This felt different. After a few days of texting, he asked me if I wanted to meet up for dinner. It was a pretty casual suggestion, nothing too fancy. So I agreed, and we set the date for Friday night. I got to the restaurant first, which I hate doing, but I wanted to make a good impression, so I found a booth and waited. When he walked in, I almost had to double take. He looked even better in person than his pictures, which, yeah, I know it sounds cliche, but it's true. He was taller than I expected, wearing this button-up shirt that fit just right, and his hair was perfectly messy in that way that only guys who try too hard can pull off. He had this easy smile, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We sat down, and everything seemed fine at first. We talked about the usual stuff, work, what we like to do in our free time, all that. But as the night went on, I started noticing little things that made my stomach twist. For example, he asked me if I still had my childhood pet, a cat named Mr. Whiskers. And I froze, like my heart literally stopped for a second. I never told him that. I hadn't even posted about Mr. Whiskers in years, so I played it cool, laughed it off like it was no big deal, but inside I was starting to freak out a little. Then he casually mentioned that he loved the book The Catcher in the Rye, and I'm sitting there thinking, wait, no one talks about that book anymore. That was my absolute favorite when I was in high school. But I didn't tell him that either. I didn't post about it. I wasn't even sure I ever mentioned it to anyone in real life. Yet he knew. It was like he had some inside information. The weirdness kept building. As the dinner went on, he dropped more little details about my life, stuff that I never mentioned. He knew what street I grew up on. He knew the high school I went to. He even knew the name of my old best friend, Julia, from elementary school. I started trying to piece it together in my head, but it didn't make sense. I mean, sure, we'd been talking for a while, but the stuff he knew was so specific. It was like he had access to some private version of my life, one that I hadn't shared with anyone, let alone a guy I just met online. At this point, I was getting uncomfortable, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid, so I just kept going along with it. But then, when we were done eating, he stood up to pay and said something that made my blood run cold. He said, "I always do my research." The way he said it was so casual, but the implication hit me like a ton of bricks. He was telling me he'd been looking up things about me before we even met. My skin prickled. I felt like I was suffocating in that booth, but I just smiled and nodded at trying to keep the mood light. He walked me to my car afterward, still chatting away, but I barely heard a word he was saying. My mind was racing. How did he know all of that stuff about me? Was he just really good at Googling people, or was there something more to it? He said goodbye with that same easy smile, but as he turned to walk away, he dropped something chilling. He said, "Don't worry. I'll be seeing you again soon." I watched him walk off into the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I wasn't sure if it was my anxiety or if it was just the weird vibe from dinner, but I couldn't ignore it. I went home, tried to shake it off, and crawled into bed. That's when things got worse. As I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, I glanced up at my window. The blinds were slightly open, and I froze. There on the glass was a red dot. It was small at first, but it was definitely there. A faint, glowing red dot in the middle of my window. It didn't look like a reflection. It didn't look like anything from inside my room. It was just there. My heart started pounding. I got up slowly, trying not to make any noise, and pulled the blinds closed as fast as I could. But I knew I couldn't ignore it. My gut told me that the red dot wasn't some weird coincidence. I grabbed my phone and called the police, explaining what happened, but by the time they showed up, there was no sign of anyone around. The dot was gone, and everything seemed too quiet. They checked around the house, but there wasn't anything to go on. The weirdest part, the next morning I looked out the window again, and the red dot was gone. No trace of it anywhere. I never saw Ned again after that. I deleted my Hinge profile, blocked him on everything. I tried to forget about it, but it's hard not to look over your shoulder when someone knows things about you that they shouldn't. I can't explain what happened. Maybe he was just a creepy guy who had a weird obsession with me, or maybe it was something even darker. All I know is I never used Hinge again after that night, and I still don't feel safe, especially when I'm alone in my room at night. I hope I never have to go through something like that again. So, I don't know I should even be telling anyone this, but honestly, I can't shake it off. I don't even know where to begin. I guess I'll just start from the start. I met this guy, Tim, on a dating app. It was just one of those casual things, you know. We matched on Bumble, exchanged a few messages, and everything seemed normal at first. He wasn't pushy or anything. He didn't try to hit me with any weird lines or anything crinky. In fact, he was funny. We had a decent conversation. Nothing alarming. We talked for a couple of days before we decided to meet up for coffee. I like that he didn't make it weird or overly romantic like some guys do when you first meet them. He was chill, we set the date, and the day came. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much, just a low-key coffee date with a guy I didn't know. When we met, he was cute enough, but there was something off about him. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Like, it wasn't anything major, just a weird vibe. I figured it was nothing. The date went okay, though. We talked about music, movies, travel, pretty typical stuff. I didn't feel a spark, but it wasn't a disaster. When we said goodbye, I figured that would be the end of it. Maybe I'd hear from him again, maybe I wouldn't. That's how dating apps go sometimes. But then things started getting weird. It started with a few texts, nothing crazy. Just casual check-ins like, "How's your day going?" Or "What are you up to?" But then, after a couple more days, I started noticing he was being a little too persistent. Like, I replied when I could, but he would send multiple messages if I didn't respond right away. Sometimes I'd get 5 or 6 texts in a row from him, all in a span of 10 minutes. At first, I thought maybe he was just excited or didn't understand boundaries, so I started being more distant. I wasn't interested, and I didn't want to lead him on. But he kept pushing, sending these long messages about how he felt we had a strong connection and how he couldn't wait to see me again. I told him I wasn't really feeling it, that I thought we were better off just being friends. I thought that would be the end of it. But that night, I got a call. It was late, around 11:30 p.m., and I had just crawled into bed. I just settled down with a book when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, thinking it might be a wrong number or a robocall. The voice on the other end of the line wasn't familiar at first, and I almost hung up, thinking it was some telemarketer. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I know where you live. I've been waiting for you." I froze. My heart dropped to my stomach. I didn't recognize the voice at all, but the way he said it was so calm, like it was no big deal. And that's when it clicked. It was Tim. I felt my pulse quicken, and I struggled to say anything, but he kept talking. He started describing places I'd been, places I'd mentioned in passing, like the park where I usually walk my dog, the restaurant I'd gone to with friends a few weeks ago. But here's the worst part. He started describing what I was wearing. I had been wearing this oversized sweater and leggings that day, and he described them in perfect detail. It was like he'd been following me. I couldn't breathe. I could hear him breathing, slow and steady, in the background, like he was waiting for me to say something, but I was frozen. He kept talking about how he knew where I was going and couldn't wait to see me again. The whole time I felt like I was going to pass out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to hang up. My hands were shaking, and I was sweating. I immediately called my best friend, but she didn't pick up. I tried my mom, and she didn't pick up either. My whole body was on high alert, like I was waiting for something to happen. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I got up, checked all the doors and windows, locked them all, and stayed up for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep a wink. I couldn't. The next morning, I went straight to work, trying to act like everything was normal, but I couldn't get that phone call out of my head. Every time I heard a car pass by, I jumped. Every time I saw someone walking down the street, I wondered if it was him. I started looking over my shoulder all the time. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was a real physical reaction. I blocked him on everything. Tinder, Instagram, Facebook, everything. I thought blocking him would make it stop, but it didn't. A few days later, I was sitting in my apartment watching TV when I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind or someone walking by, but then I heard it again. It was like a whisper. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear it clear as day. My heart started to race. I ran to the window and peeked through the blinds, but there was no one there. My mind was playing tricks on me, I told myself. But then the next night, I heard it again. It was more distinct this time. It sounded like his voice. I couldn't take it anymore. I called the police, explained everything, and told them about the phone call and the whispering outside. They came and checked around the area, but found nothing. They couldn't do anything, though. There was no concrete evidence that anything illegal was happening. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. It wasn't in my head. After that, I stopped leaving my apartment much. I started keeping the blinds closed all the time. I didn't answer my phone unless I knew who it was. I felt like I was living in a constant state of fear, but I didn't know what else to do. I never heard from Tim directly again, but I still get those whispers. Sometimes they're faint, and sometimes they're clearer. Every time I hear them, my heart skips a beat. I don't know how long this is going to go on, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, waiting, watching. I never went back on a dating app after that. Honestly, I don't think I ever will. So this is a story I still can't shake off, even though it happened a while ago. It all started when I matched with Kate on Tinder. We'd been talking for a few days, and at first it was normal. Just the usual stuff you'd expect. What we're into, random jokes, making plans to meet up eventually. Nothing super weird. But then, things got intense fast. At first, I thought it was cute when she started calling me her soulmate. It was early, but I guess I brushed it off as her just being really into the whole romantic connection thing. She would text me all the time saying stuff like, I feel like we've known each other forever, or this is so weird, but I feel so connected to you. It was nice at first. I mean, it felt good to be wanted, and who doesn't like someone showing a lot of interest, right? But after a few days, I started getting texts constantly. Every time I would check my phone, there'd be another message from her. It wasn't anything creepy at first, just like, hey, hope you're having a good day, or I'd miss you already. But it got to the point where it was almost overwhelming. I tried to text her back when I could, but I was busy with work, seeing friends, and just trying to live my life. Still, it felt like I was doing something wrong when I wouldn't reply fast enough. The thing is, every time I didn't respond within an hour, she'd send another message and then another. If I didn't reply within a few hours, the tone of the messages started to shift. I guess you're too busy for me, or I hope you didn't forget about me. I started to feel like I was being smothered. I mean, we hadn't even met in person yet. And here she was, acting like we were already in a serious relationship. It was honestly starting to stress me out. One night, I came home after hanging out with some friends, and was in the middle of making dinner when I got a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I thought maybe it was a neighbor or a delivery. I opened the door, and there she was, Kate, standing in the hall with a big smile, holding a bottle of wine like she'd just come over for a casual hang. At first, I thought maybe it was some sort of joke. Like, did I invite her? I checked my messages, and I definitely hadn't. She looked kind of nervous but excited at the same time. I just knew where you lived, she said, like it was no big deal. I was kind of shocked and didn't know how to respond. I was not expecting this, especially not this early. I hadn't even given her my address, so how did she find me? She kept standing there, waiting for me to invite her in. My brain was going a million miles an hour trying to make sense of it. I could feel my stomach drop as I realized she had somehow tracked down where I lived. That's when I told her, as politely as I could, that this was too much and I needed her to leave. I could tell she was hurt by my response, and I hated seeing her upset, but I knew it was the only thing I could do. She didn't leave right away, though. She stood there for a second, staring at me, then looked down at the wine she was holding. I just thought we were closer than this, she said. But I guess you're not as invested as I am. She said it so quietly, almost to herself, like I wasn't even supposed to hear it. I stepped back and told her again that I needed her to go. After a few seconds, she finally turned around, still holding the bottle of wine, and left. I felt so relieved when the door closed behind me, but something about the whole situation stuck with me. How the hell did she know where I lived? I didn't want to be rude, but that was crossing a serious line. The next few days, she kept texting me. She started calling me emotionally unavailable, saying things like, "I thought you were different, but you're just like the rest." I tried to explain that it was too soon for me to feel that comfortable with her, but it didn't matter. Her texts were relentless. She'd send 10 messages in a row, all with different tones. Some angry, some sad, some begging me to talk to her. At that point, I started feeling trapped. Every time I checked my phone, there'd be a notification from Kate. If I ignored her, I'd get a string of texts questioning if I was seeing someone else or why I wasn't giving her a chance. It was suffocating. I had to block her. I didn't want to, but I didn't know what else to do. I blocked her on Tinder, deleted my profile, and went silent. I thought it would be over after that, but it wasn't. For the next few weeks, I still had that nagging feeling that something was wrong. I couldn't shake the thought that she was still watching me somehow. I'd be walking around town and feel like someone was following me. It wasn't just in my head, either. There were times when I'd catch someone glancing at me from across the street, and it made my heart race. But I'd tell myself I was just being paranoid. But one night, a few weeks after blocking her, I was sitting in my living room when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a reflection in the window, a shadowy figure standing across the street, looking directly at my apartment. The streetlights weren't great, but I could make out a person's outline. They stood there, unmoving, for a good 10 minutes. It freaked me out so much that I went to my window, but by the time I looked outside, they were gone. It didn't take a genius to figure out who it was. I knew it had to be Kate. I tried calling a few friends to come over, but no one picked up. I ended up just sitting in my living room with the lights off, staring at the front door, waiting for her to show up again. Nothing happened that night, but the next few days I didn't leave my apartment much. I started noticing more weird things, like the occasional note left on my door or strange messages from unknown numbers. I couldn't escape the feeling that she was still out there watching. Eventually, I got enough courage to go to the police. I showed them some of the messages she had sent and told them of the time she showed up at my apartment. But they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence, and I couldn't afford to keep filing reports every time something strange happened. I've never used Tinder again. In fact, I've stayed away from most dating apps since then. It's been months, but I still can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I'll get this weird sense of unease when I'm walking around like someone's just a little too close. I wish I could say it's all in my head, but deep down I know it's not. I'm still not sure how it all started, but I can tell you that I wish I had never downloaded that app. It's one of those situations where you think everything is normal, and then, out of nowhere, things get way too real. The weirdest part, it all started on Tinder. So, yeah, I matched with Chris. At first, it seemed pretty typical. He seemed like one of those guys who had it together, good job, decent photos, funny, all the usual stuff. He was friendly enough, asked about my interests, and even mentioned that he had a dog too, which was a nice little connection for me because I'm obsessed with my dog Penny. Seriously, she's my whole world. I go anywhere with her and I talk about her constantly. We texted for a couple of weeks. It was honestly pretty chill. He was cute, we had good conversations, and even joked about meeting up for drinks. But things started to get a little off after that. At first, it was subtle, just random texts from him, but then it escalated fast. One day, I woke up to a message from him saying, "Good morning. Henny looks cute in her red leash today, by the way." I was confused. Like, how did he know that? Henny does wear a red leash, but I never told him. I hadn't even posted a picture of her recently with it. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he'd seen a photo I'd posted before or something, but still, it felt a little weird. Then it happened again. A few days later, I got another message. "I saw you walking her by the park today." How was the walk? He sent it right after I had taken Penny to the park. The thing is, I didn't tell him I was going to the park. He had no way of knowing I was there. I started to feel that weird unease you get when something doesn't quite add up, but I didn't want to be rude, so I played it off like it was no big deal. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then the next thing came that really got to me. I got a notification on my phone one evening. It was a picture message from Chris, but it wasn't a picture of us or anything cute. It was a picture of my house. Not like some random photo from Google either. No, this was a picture he took. From across the street, I could see my driveway, my front door, and the trees in my yard. In the corner of the photo, you could barely make out Penny, who was sitting near the window. I froze. My heart started pounding, and I could feel my palms sweating. My phone felt heavy in my hand. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was a mistake, that maybe he had just gotten confused or something, but I couldn't shake the fear. He had clearly been watching me, and now he had somehow gotten close enough to my house to snap that picture. I blocked him immediately, deleted the app, told myself it was over, but it wasn't. The next day, I was at work trying to forget about the whole situation. It was a normal Tuesday morning. I had a bunch of things to get done, but as I sat down at my desk, I saw another notification from Chris. My stomach twisted in knots. It was another photo. This one? It was of my street. The photo was taken from a distance, but it was unmistakably my block, my street side, my neighbors' houses, and my car parked right in front of my house. He was getting closer. I didn't know how, but somehow he was tracking me. I felt sick. I didn't even have time to process what was happening before I got another message from him. "I'm just trying to be closer to you. I'll be seeing you soon." I couldn't take it anymore. I was terrified. At that point, I knew I had to do something about it, but I didn't know what. I called my best friend, and she said I needed to tell the police. She kept telling me that I wasn't crazy, that he was stalking me, and it wasn't safe to ignore it. I wasn't sure what the police could even do, but I went to the station and reported it. They didn't seem overly concerned at first, but after seeing the photos and hearing everything, they agreed to look into it. They told me to change my routine and to report any more incidents, but nothing really prepared me for what happened next. That same week on Thursday afternoon, I was working when I saw someone walk by my office window. It wasn't unusual for people to walk by, but something about this person caught my attention. They didn't look familiar. I stood up from my desk trying to get a better look, and then I saw the unmistakable figure, Chris. He was just standing there looking at my building. My blood ran cold. He had followed me to work. I didn't even know what to do in that moment. I wanted to scream, but I didn't want him to know I'd seen him. I was on the verge of panic when I called the police again. The officers arrived quickly, and thankfully, Chris was gone by the time they showed up. But the damage had been done. I couldn't stop shaking. It took me a couple hours to finally feel like I wasn't on edge. I knew I couldn't stay in that building alone, so I left early and went straight home. But the fear was just too much. I couldn't relax. I felt like I was constantly being watched. Every time I heard footsteps outside my door or saw a shadow in my window, I would freeze. The police told me that I had enough evidence to get a restraining order, so I did. I wasn't going to take any more chances. When the judge granted the restraining order, I felt a little relief, but it didn't completely wipe away the fear. I haven't heard from Chris since the restraining order went through, but the whole thing left me paranoid. I still check my windows every night before bed. I still lock every door, every window, and have even gotten security cameras just to be safe. I had trouble trusting people online ever since. Tinder is something I'd rather forget about. Dating apps just aren't worth it if it means risking this kind of thing. The most disturbing part. A few months ago, I found a piece of paper in my mailbox with a single sentence written on it. "I'm always watching you." I don't know if it's really Chris or just some sick joke, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. I just don't know how long I'll have to live with this fear. This happened a few months ago, and I still can't shake it. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I figured I should finally tell someone. I met this woman, Rachel, on OkCupid, and at first, everything seemed pretty normal. You know how it goes. You message back and forth a bit, talk about basic stuff like hobbies, music, movies, all the usual things. It felt pretty chill. She was cute, smart, and seemed down to earth. Her profile was really well thought out, and she had a lot of the same interests as me, so I thought it'd be worth meeting up in person. But things got weird really fast. We'd been talking for maybe 4 or 5 days, and then out of nowhere, her messages started to shift. They weren't the casual, fun texts I was used to. Instead, she started sending these texts that felt like, well, they felt demanding in a way that made me uncomfortable. At first, it wasn't super obvious, but it got worse. It started with little things like, why aren't you texting me back? Do you not like me? Or, are you seeing someone else? I was a bit taken aback. I thought maybe she was just insecure or something. I tried to brush it off. But then one night, I looked at my phone to a message that made my heart sob. It was a picture of my apartment building. A photo taken from the street, clearly snapped from someone just standing there. There were no streetlights around, so the photo was a little dark, but you could see the outline of my building clearly enough. She sent the photo with a simple caption, "I'll wait for you to come out." I froze. I had never told her where I lived. We'd only talked online, and I'd never mentioned my address. I didn't even share my neighborhood or anything close to it. So how did she know where I lived? I started to feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't respond, but my heart was pounding. I immediately blocked her number, but it didn't stop there. The next morning, I woke up to another message from her, this time from a different account. Same profile pic, just a different name. It hit me that she had created a whole new account just to keep contacting me. I blocked that account too, but by then, I was already feeling like I needed to get out of there. I had a bad feeling, and that feeling didn't go away. It only got worse. I deleted my OkCupid profile entirely. I figured that would solve the problem. But it didn't. A few days later, I was walking home from the grocery store, and I noticed someone across the street walking at the same pace as me. I didn't think much of it at first. People walk at the same pace all the time. But then I looked over, and there she was. Rachel. I saw her standing on the other side of the street staring at me. She didn't smile or wave, just stood there watching. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I didn't even know what to do. I just kept walking, pretending like I hadn't noticed her, but I could feel my palms sweating. It felt like my whole body was on high alert. The walk home was longer than usual, and I couldn't stop looking behind me. I kept thinking she was following me, but I didn't dare turn around again to check. When I got inside, I locked the door, checked all the windows, and just sat down, tried to calm myself down. I couldn't get the image of her standing there out of my head. It felt like something out of a bad movie. The next few days were even worse. My phone would ring, but it was always an unknown number. I never answered it. And every now and then, I'd get a message from an unknown account. They would say things like, "I saw you walk into your building today," or "I know what you're doing this weekend." It was starting to feel like I was being hunted. I even started to get the feeling that she might be watching me from a distance like a shadow, but I never saw her for sure again. Eventually, I couldn't take any more. I went to the police and filed a report. I had the photos from her, the messages, the details of her stalking behavior. But like most people who've been in a situation like this, I was told there wasn't a lot they could do without more concrete proof or her actually breaking any laws. That's when I realized I had to change everything. I started taking different routes home from work, stopped going to places I usually go, and even changed my grocery store. I made sure I was never alone in public places. Then I thought I was in the clear. I hadn't heard anything for a while, and I figured she'd given up. I kept checking the locks on my doors and windows every night, but that was just out of habit by now. Then one night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it, but something told me I should. It was her. The text was simple but bone-chilling. It said, "You can't hide forever." I don't know what it is about that message, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just creepy, it felt threatening. I called the police again, but by the time they showed up, there was nothing to report. She was gone, and that was the last I ever heard from her. I don't know if she was just really obsessed or if something was seriously wrong with her, but that entire experience made me rethink everything about dating apps. I stopped using them. I made sure all my social media accounts were private, and I've been way more careful about what I share online since. I still get the occasional weird vibe when I walk around my neighborhood or if I see someone standing a little too close to me on the street. I've gotten so paranoid that I keep checking behind me now just to make sure I'm not being followed. I really thought I'd moved on, but I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there somewhere watching. I guess that's the thing with dating apps. You never really know who you're talking to until it's too late. So this happened about a year ago, and I'm still not sure if I was just imagining things or if it was something genuinely off. Either way, I don't think I'll ever use Tinder again. Here's what happened. I matched with a guy named Jake on Tinder. His profile was totally normal, nothing weird or out of place. He had a few good pictures, a couple with friends, some with his dog. He seemed nice, and his messages were super chill, so after a couple of days of chatting, we agreed to meet in person. Nothing crazy, just coffee at a local cafe. Pretty standard, right? I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. But as soon as I saw him in real life, something felt wrong. I can't explain it, but his eyes stood out immediately. There was something off about them. They were wide open, but it wasn't like he was staring at me. It was more like he was looking through me. His gaze was just blank, like there was no emotion behind it. I've met plenty of people with different types of eyes, but these were just unsettling. Empty. I felt my stomach drop as I walked up to him, and I instantly got a weird vibe, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. We sat down, ordered our drinks, and started talking. But it wasn't like a normal conversation. He barely smiled, and his voice was weirdly monotone, like really flat. He didn't sound angry or sad, but he didn't sound happy either. It was just empty. I can't explain it any other way. He would say things like, "We were meant to meet," or "This is how it was supposed to happen." At first, I figured he was just nervous or awkward, but the more he talked, the more unsettled I felt. I kept trying to steer the conversation to normal topics, movies, work, anything, but he kept going back to this destiny talk. I honestly don't remember most of what he said because it just felt like a blur, but I could feel the unease growing. It wasn't even the words themselves, but the way he said them, like he was too sure about it, like there was something dark behind his calm words. And that's when I made the decision to leave. I didn't even know what I was trying to avoid. I just felt this overwhelming need to get away. So I faked some excuse like I had to be somewhere, and I ended the date early. He didn't push back. He just nodded and said, "Okay, I'll see you again soon." It was so casual, like he was certain. I remember walking out of that cafe so fast, like my legs couldn't carry me fast enough. Once I got home, I thought about blocking him, but I didn't do it right away. I just went about my day and tried to shake off the weirdness. Maybe I was overthinking it, I told myself, but the whole situation kept gnawing at me. It wasn't until later that night that things started getting strange. I got a Tinder notification. It was a like from Jake. At first I thought, okay, maybe he just liked my profile again. Maybe he just didn't realize what happened. But it wasn't just one like, it was a few. Over the next couple of days, I kept getting random likes from him. Just likes, nothing else. No messages, no conversation. And here's the thing, I had already unmatched him. I know because I remember doing it that night when I got home, just to be done with it. But there it was, his profile popping up on my screen again. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It felt like I was being watched. I know that sounds dramatic, but every time I opened Tinder, there'd be a new like from him. Even though I had unmatched him, it was like he was lurking in the background, constantly popping up. He wasn't saying anything, but it was like he was still there. I would check my notifications, and his profile was always sitting there waiting. The worst part was I didn't know how he was doing it. Was he stalking me? Was he using a different account to still look at my profile? Was it just a glitch? I started feeling paranoid every time I went on Tinder. I kept thinking that maybe I'd see him in public again, or that he'd show up at my door. Every time I get a notification, my heart would race. I didn't want to see his name pop up again, but I couldn't escape it. A few more days passed and I kept getting those likes, but there were still no messages from him. Then one night, I got a message from an account I didn't recognize. I was almost afraid to open it, but I did. It was a message from a different Tinder profile that looked exactly like Jake's. Same pictures, same bio, everything. The only difference, this profile was new. Like a brand new account that had been created since I had unmatched him. The message was simple, just, "I'll be waiting for you." I blocked the account immediately. My hands were shaking when I did it, and I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer. I deleted Tinder right after that. I just didn't want to be part of it anymore. Something felt wrong, and I didn't want to push my luck. I still have no idea how he was doing it, how he kept popping up, or why he seemed so persistent. I don't know if he was just messing with me or if something more sinister was going on, but I do know that I haven't gone back to Tinder since. I don't think I ever will. I still get weird feelings sometimes when I'm out, like I'm being watched. I can't shake it, honestly. I feel like I'm always checking my surroundings. I hate that I let it get that far, but I can't go back now. Anyway, I just wanted to get this off my chest. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's something more. I don't know. If you're ever on Tinder, just trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. I sure won't. So this happened a little while ago, and I still can't shake the weirdness of it. I had been using plenty of fish on and off for a few months, mostly just trying to meet people, casually. I wasn't expecting anything serious, just someone to chat with. That's my match with Ben. At first, he seemed totally normal. He had a nice smile, his profile didn't seem like a scam, and we started talking pretty quickly. The usual stuff: work, hobbies, movies. Nothing too out of the ordinary. After a few days of messaging, though, he started getting a little too personal. Like, way too personal. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he just liked to ask questions. Maybe he was just trying to be engaging. But the more we talked, the more it seemed like he knew things about me that I hadn't told him. Things that weren't even on my profile. He sent me a message one day saying, "I saw you at that concert last week." The thing is, I hadn't posted about going to that concert anywhere. I didn't even tell my friends exactly where I was going, so I wasn't sure how he'd known. I thought it was a coincidence at first. Maybe he was just guessing. But then he said something else that made my stomach twist. "I noticed you walk your dog at the park every morning." I froze. I'd never mentioned anything about walking my dog, not even to him. I didn't post about it on social media, and it wasn't something I talked about in our conversations. He was literally describing something that only I did, and no one else knew about. I didn't know what to do. I thought about just letting it go, maybe assuming he was just being creepy but not dangerous. But then I started to get paranoid. How did he know these things? Was he stalking me? I confronted him about it. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I told him that I was freaked out by how much he seemed to know about my life. His response was chilling. He just said, "I know more about you than you think." I didn't know how to respond to that. It was like he was toying with me, almost daring me to figure out how much he actually knew. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to talk to him anymore. I blocked him and deleted my Plenty of Fish account, but that didn't stop it from getting worse. The next day, I went to my car after work, and there was a note on my windshield. Just a small piece of paper with a message written in blocky, uneven handwriting. It said, "I'm waiting to meet you." I almost lost it right there in the parking lot. I felt this cold, crawling fear take over. How had he found me? I hadn't told him where I lived or where I worked. I'd never given him any hint of my daily routine, so how the hell did he know my car? It wasn't a huge leap to assume that Ben had been following me, watching me somehow, even if I didn't know how. But that note made everything so real. It wasn't just a weird guy on the internet anymore. It was someone who was watching me in person. I couldn't stay in the same place anymore. It felt like everything around me had become unsafe. I went home that night and started looking for new places to move. I couldn't take the chance of him showing up at my apartment or worse, my job. After that, I didn't stay in the same place for long. I found a new place to live in a different part of town, far from where I had been. I made sure to change my routine. I started walking a different route to work, took different streets, even changed the times I'd leave in the morning just in case. I told my friends about what happened, but I still didn't want to let them know exactly how much it had messed with my head. The whole thing had freaked me out in a way I couldn't explain. It was just this nagging, suffocating feeling like I was being watched all the time. I kept checking over my shoulder when I walked outside. I locked the doors more often. I haven't used Plenty of Fish since. I deleted all my dating apps completely, and I don't know if I'll ever go back to them. I don't know if Ben was just some guy who took things too far or if there was something really wrong with him, but I didn't want to find out. It's been a few months since everything happened, and things have gotten a little better. I don't feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder anymore, but the weirdest thing still happens sometimes. I'll be out walking my dog at the park, my new different park on the way, and I'll see someone who reminds me of Ben. They'll be standing just a little too still or looking at me for just a bit too long, and my heart will skip. It's like my brain doesn't fully let go of the fear, and always wondering if I'm still being watched. Maybe it's irrational, but that's how it is now. I guess I'll never really know what Ben's deal was. Maybe he was harmless, just creepy. Or maybe he was something worse. Either way, I won't ever know for sure. But I do know that I haven't felt truly safe since it happened, and that feeling sticks with you. That's what they don't tell you when you're swiping through profiles. Sometimes it's not just strangers online. Sometimes they're out there waiting for you to take that next step.